Still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. The time is 8:37 Central African Time, and we're going to be switching gears now to a rather concerning state of affairs. South Africans, all of us, you and I, you and me, we are once again at the center of something that's very, very concerning. We're going to be chatting briefly about what's going to be a hard couple of months for all of us, the high cost of living, which is seemingly getting out of hand. Fuel and power prices are essentially making life a bit difficult for all of us. And this is down to, I think, what we all know and understand by now, what's happening around the world. The price of petrol obviously being fueled, excuse the pun, by the ongoing instability in the Middle East, Israel and the United States of America's war against Iran. That saw an increase in petrol, and we know when fuel goes up, everything goes up. Eskom also just went on and announced that there's going to be an increase in electricity prices. So this is after they got approval from NERSA. So it's going to be a rough couple of months for all South Africans, but we're going to be going beyond the headlines. We'll be talking about what does this mean for ordinary South Africans, you and I, and how deep the impact is going to be. And we're going to be chatting to programs coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic Justice and Dignity Group, Mr. Mervyn Abrahams, who's joining us via our virtual platform. Mervyn, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to News and Views. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Good morning, and good morning to all your viewers and listeners.
The pleasure is all ours, and I think we'll jump right into it. From your perspective, just looking at the projections of just how everything will be going up in the next couple of months. How do you assess the situation generally? Because this is your work. You deal with looking at the cost of living and how South Africans are affected by it. Just your quick analysis on where we find ourselves and where we're going to be finding ourselves in the next couple of months.
So I think we need to start off from the perspective that South African households, the majority of South African households, at least 60% or more, are already in a cost of living crisis. So it's not as if we are going to go into a crisis. We are already in that crisis. When you look, for instance, at the cost of a basket of food, which we track over a monthly basis, you would see that basket of 44 very basic foods already in the month of February stands at 5,383 Rand. And when you look at a national minimum wage, for instance, a national minimum wage is well below that. It's at 4,000, somewhere in the region of 4,000. So already a national minimum wage cannot buy you the amount of food that you require. So that's already the current situation that we're facing. Households are spending about 40% below what they should be spending on nutritious food, etc. So looking into the future of the base of this current crisis, we are projecting that the crisis is likely to deepen significantly more because of three things. What you have mentioned, the US and Israel's war on Iran, which has now meant that fuel prices are likely to increase. We source a lot of our fuel from the Middle East, and a lot of our fuel comes through the Strait of Hormuz, so it will likely be impacted. So, and of course, fuel prices. So we're talking about petrol and diesel, but fuel prices are an input cost into almost the entire value chain of goods and services that are produced. So it has an impact on food prices. It has an impact on logistics, transporting things back and forth. It has an impact almost on your entire economy. So it's likely to see inflationary pressures in our economy, and particularly around food. So exactly exactly how much an increase we could possibly see is very difficult to predict. You see it when you look back rather than ahead. But things like fuel, fertilizers, packaging are likely to increase going forward if this war continues. So that's with regard to food. And then, as you've mentioned, electricity, the electricity increase of 8.7% that Eskom will be charging. It's good just to take one step back. So as from the 1st of March, the national minimum wage is being increased by 5%. Okay, 5% increase on the national minimum wage, which is an above CPI increase. CPI, according to stats, was standing at around 4.4%. So that's a 0.6% above inflation. But now with the 8.7% increase of electricity, we estimate that an ordinary household that uses about 350 kilowatts of prepaid electricity, that an extra 103 rand and 53 cents will be added to the electricity bill. Now that leaves out of that 5% increase, leaves a real increase of 138 rand by itself. Okay, so that's left afterwards. So that now has to deal with the increase in transport costs that we could likely see. It will have to deal with the increase in food costs that we are likely to see. And so what we are projecting is that households will go into deeper levels of household food insecurity, because that's the only thing you control. Electricity, you have to pay what you've got. Transport, you have to pay what you have. So the only other thing that you can control is really food. So that's going to be the area where we are going to see a deeper household food insecurity and potentially deeper hunger and malnutrition in the country.
Very, very concerning indeed. And, we've been mentioning a lot of factors that contribute to this pinch that all South Africans are going to be feeling, if, most are not even feeling it by now. How much of this crisis is beyond South Africa's control? We mentioned international global factors like the oil price shocks and the currency weakness, what we see in the Middle East and the instability there. But how much of this is structural? It's within South Africa in itself, and it's something that can be changed to make sure that at least the blow is softened when it comes to South Africans tightening up their belts.
So a lot of this has to do with planning. And of course, when you're in the middle of a crisis, you can't suddenly start planning. You have to plan prior, expecting crisis. I mean, we should become, as government, we should be looking more at risk mitigation. And risk mitigation leads then to planning. Now, already when the war in Ukraine pushed up the prices of food, wheat, bread, cooking oils, we were saying, that we have to expect more of these geopolitical crises. And already then, 2 years ago, we were saying, if a war breaks out in the Middle East, then it's going to impact us badly. So what kind of planning should we be doing? So we should be increasing our strategic reserves of fuel, so that come a crisis, we can release some of that onto the market and stabilize prices locally. We should be increasing buffer stocks, what we call buffer stocks. So those would be food stock of major cereals. So for instance, we're talking there about maize, we're talking there about wheat, we might be talking there about soya, etc. Things that you can store over a long period of time. And we need to have strategic reserves of those kinds of food that can be released onto the market in cases of crises. and we haven't done sufficient planning, and we haven't done sufficient strategic resource mobilization, and that's catching up with us now.
Yes, I want to expand on that because I think it's very, very important. The shortfalls of government and how we essentially were caught with our pants down because crisis was always looming. And I want to continue on that note right after this short break.
Right now, over 150 million children around the world are orphaned, facing hunger, hardship, and uncertainty. With Islamic Relief's Orphan Sponsorship Program, you can provide a child with access to education, nutritious food, essential healthcare, and a safe home. Your sponsorship is not just support, it's hope, security, and a brighter future. Be the reason an orphan child smiles again. Sponsor an orphan today with Islamic Relief.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free zakat calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
Elite Basmati, available throughout the Middle East, and now for the very first time exclusive to South Africa, brought to you by Murchison Spice, Pietermaritzburg's most famous specialty store. Elite Basmati, available in aromatic white and golden cellar, is packaged in a world-class facility in India and is filled with wholesome goodness for your well-being. Elite Basmati rice by Murchison Spice. For trade inquiries, contact Mohammed on 033 387 2121. Murchison Spice.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views. Myself, Salaila Makwidi. The time is 10 minutes before top of the hour 9, and we're still in conversation with Mervyn Abrahams, who's giving us a really, really important rude awakening about the failures of government when it comes to mitigating the pinch that we're all going to feel, the tightening of belts, if there's still space to tighten your belts when it comes to the rising cost of living. And Mervyn, thank you so much for staying with us. Before we went on to that short break, you were mentioning something very, very important. The fact that we were essentially, and when you say we, I'm alluding to the government because they're the ones that have the power to make sure that everything that you've mentioned when it comes to making sure that we cushion ourselves should things like the Middle Eastern crisis happen or we have other abnormalities that happen, whether there's a drought or anything that might affect South Africans and our ability to live good quality lives is their job. And you mentioned something very, very important, the storage of fuel and the storage of food, grains that are very, very important and are staple in South Africa. Maybe if the government did enough when it comes to that aspect, we probably could have softened the blow. Can you expand a bit on that? Because it's very, very important.
Yeah, so many countries, I mean, we're seeing now, for instance, European countries, we see it in the US, they are releasing some of their strategic fuel costs in order to push prices down locally. And it's for that reason that even though people say, well, They're releasing all the strategic stock, but the price of petrol is still above $100. But if they didn't do that, it probably would have been $150 or closer to $200. So it is playing a role in the market. We have to think about food and petroleum as strategic, national security strategic resources. When people go hungry, it has a national strategic impact, because you see it in terms of riots, and you see it in terms of a breakdown of society. So it's government's role to make sure that it thinks about these areas, and we haven't been thinking about these areas as we should have. I mean, there is a strategic fuel reserve. How much is in that reserve? We don't know. I don't know. Gwedi Mataj hasn't told us whether there is any level of thinking within government to release it onto the market. We still don't know. But there is another area in which government can also mitigate risks, and that is also a better integration of our African economies. So for instance, Angola is a big producer of petroleum, but most of ours are coming from the Middle East, whilst Angola is just so close by. So there isn't sufficient integration. Now, I do know it is one of government's top priorities around integrating the economies of Africa. The African Union, African market. That is government's intention, and I know they're working very hard at it. But it takes time. It takes time to link economies. And so we need to do much more of that. And the other issue to do with petrol that we might have to consider at this time because of the crisis is that a large part of what we pay at the pump actually is tax.
Taxes, true.
It's not the cost of the fuel. Now, we also know that government does need the revenue, because if government doesn't have revenue, it can't pay social grants. So it does need revenue. But to what extent can government, if we get really deep into a crisis and this war continues for 6 months or so, to what extent can government lessen the load by re-looking at some of the administered costs associated with fuel, and so that's. And then the other thing, in terms of our planning, we have been warning for years that we grow our food very far away from the tables where we consume it. So, for instance, most of the tomatoes you buy in Durban has probably been grown in Limpopo. Now, you transport that by car or by truck, so you are exposed to fuel prices. We need to get Transnet up and running so that we can transport it via rail. That is the most cheapest, the most effective, the most efficient way of transporting goods across the country. And we're not using that sufficiently. So that's another area that in risk mitigation we need to look very seriously at.
No, most definitely. And you're asking a question about how many strategic, oil reserves we have. Apparently, it's around 7.7 to 8 million barrels of oil, but that's still not verified because government has not come out. But just in closing, outside of the high cerebral economic logistical jargon that we're throwing around, which is very, very important, you have regular people listening right now that are like, Mervyn, what do I do now? How do I stretch my back to make sure that I don't know, try and lessen the load, the pinch when it comes to my family and how we survive and how we eat? Any tips on that? How can families try and save money, try and stretch their rand to make sure that life doesn't change as drastically as it might?
Well, two things I'd like to say. The first one is not a direct answer to your question. It is more an appeal to retailers. The appeal to retailers is, do not increase your current stock that was bought on previous prices.
It'll be very, very hard to not convince them otherwise.
So our appeal to consumers is to check the prices. If you see a sudden increase in prices, we would like to know, because there are stock in the country that is not yet affected by these price increases. What often happens is, when we beat the drums about there's going to be increases, there's going to be increases, there's going to be increases, it raises the temptation for retailers to increase immediately. And there is no need for immediate increases. So that is just one thing I want to say, and I want to warn consumers about, to be careful to monitor prices when they see price increases, so that we are not using a crisis that the global community and poor South Africans are facing out of, to enrich ourselves. So that's the first thing. The second thing to consumers is that there are actually very little that consumers can do. I mentioned the national minimum wage. And that already half of the national minimum wage is going to be taken up with Eskom's increase. So that leaves about an extra 100 Rand in a national minimum wage. So our advice is to realize that the crisis will get deeper. It will get worse before it gets better, likely. So make sure that you don't spend on things that you don't absolutely need. And try and budget, try and write a list before you go to the shop, so that you don't buy extra things that you might already have in your cupboard and things like that. Budget, write lists, be careful about how you spend, because there's a likelihood that food prices will increase in the future, but it doesn't have to happen today.
I think you put it very, very well, especially with the retailers, because when there's a crisis, other people see an opportunity. But we're going to leave on that note, Mervyn. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you so much.
There you go, Program Coordinator at the Pietermaritzburg Economic and Justice and Dignity Group, Mervyn Abrahams, giving us insight on what's going to be a tough couple of months, if not a tough year, when it comes to the cost of living here in South Africa. And I want to hear from you. You can engage with us. What methods are you using to try and save money? How have you changed your shopping? How have you changed the way that you procure fuel? How do you save electricity? Let's share tips. It's going to be very, very hard. And I know there are other people that have it on lock. They'll tell you, I look for specials. I don't shop at one place. There's a lot. You can engage with us. Our studio line is 01168000355 on WhatsApp, 061-766-0355. How are you saving money? How are you cushioning yourself from what's going to be a very, very difficult 2026? Going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're getting fired up with AMA.